Okay, wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful.
exactly
Well, thanks for the great introduction, Matt, and congratulations, Jack, on your new journey. So yeah, so as you know, this is great. I quite frankly, I don't know whether to be. I know all of us are upset about the, you know, especially here in the US with what's going on with the whole lockdown. But on the other hand, I don't think I would have been speaking at a meetup in London without coming there in any other scenario. So this is great. So hello, everybody. Glad to be here. As Matt mentioned, my name is Sanjeev Sharma. In a prior life, I was the CTO for DevOps adoption at IBM. I've been in the DevOps space from the early days. My first DevOps engagement was in 2012. And since then, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of very interesting projects. For IBM, I left IBM around almost more than a year and a half ago, worked for a startup named Delphix. Actually, I was in London just a couple of months ago for Delphix. Well, more than a couple of months ago. Time is moving very fast, and spoke at a conference there. Along the way, I've written a couple of books. So let me start with some shameless self-promotion of my two books. The first one is the original DevOps for Dummies. This is the free download. It's available at ibm.com. You can download it for free. Obviously not for you all here, but for people you know. The second book is called the DevOps Adoption Playbook. That's available wherever good books are sold. And I write a blog where I talk about DevOps, data ops, data, cloud in general. So feel free to check it out. And as mentioned, you know, please put questions in the Q&A session, and I'll be more than happy to address them. So this talk is actually based on a blog post I wrote, which it was written, you know, in March of this year, based on certain experiences I've had while working with some clients who came to me or came to, you know, the organization I was with at that time and said, you know, we want to do multi-cloud. You know, multi-cloud is the new cool thing. Let's go do multi-cloud and you come help us do it. And sure, we jumped right in and then started questioning, right? Is multi-cloud really something they need? And then I'll talk about this particular incident where we had with a customer where they had gone multi-cloud. They were deployed on 2 different clouds with a cloud abstraction layer in between. I won't name any vendors, so to protect the innocent and the guilty. And we ran into major issues with how do we resolve situations? How do we do monitoring? How do we do root cause analysis and even restore service for something which is now becoming more and more complex? So I'll jump right in, right? And feel free to ask questions. So I'm going to give you 3 scenarios, right? And these are real customers. I've removed the names, as I mentioned. Some of them you can probably guess very easily who they are. Unfortunately, I can't anonymize it that much. And I want you to think, is this a scenario to go multi-cloud or not? And then I'll answer the question. So scenario 1 is an online flower vendor, right? And they do more than 92% of their business on 3 days preceding 2 occasions. You know, Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, right? Nobody's buying flowers for Father's Day. So it's Valentine's Day and Mother's Day. And during those 3 days preceding each one of those events, they sell 92% of their revenue is gathered there, which means what, during those 3 days, they want 100% time, you know, uptime, you know, minutes downtime. And, you know, somebody comes there for a few seconds. If they're down, guess what they're going to do? They're going to jump over to one of the competitors' website and just order flowers from there. There's no differentiation, right? Flowers are flowers. So during those 3 days, they cannot have any downtime, right? They need 100% uptime. And their answer to that was not just to do multiple availability zones and multiple regions within the same cloud, but to go multi-cloud and build a solution which they could ensure 100% availability across by jumping between multiple clouds. So question to you, is this a good scenario for multi-cloud? Second scenario is a company which is in the pharma space, right? They were developing some AI which analyzes results from hundreds and hundreds of research studies and crunches numbers to figure out, you know, some potential scenarios and potential solutions their drug researchers need to be working on. And for them, the biggest question is time. The biggest variable is time. Their metrics are all based about how quickly can their computations go. So deploying their application to the best and fastest GPUs is most important. And they want to be able to deploy to wherever the GPUs are the latest and also where the GPUs are the cheapest. So their goal is to make their application totally portable. They never run on two clouds at any given time. They keep moving from cloud to cloud and want to deploy to wherever the GPUs are the cheapest. So is this a scenario for multi-cloud? The third is also a company which has a virtual appliance, and this appliance looks at some machine learning, has some machine learning built into it. It learns the behavior of your network, of all your infrastructure and its behavior and all your applications and services, how they're talking to each other. And once it learns that behavior, it then can spot erratic behavior which is outside the norm, outliers. So it can be looking for where there might be a rogue service or a rogue user trying to do something which it is not supposed to do, and be able to learn the behaviors and then look for variants and outlier conditions and boundary conditions where it can be an example of some kind of cyber breach, security breach. So they need to be running wherever, cloud, on-prem, off-prem, any cloud, private cloud, public cloud, they need to run everywhere. Is this multi-cloud? So these are three scenarios, real customers I worked with, and each one of them had come and said, we want to go multi-cloud, come help us. And for each one was a head scratcher to go, is this really multi-cloud? Do they really need multi-cloud? So let's look at the answer. The flower vendor, absolutely it's a multi-cloud scenario, because they want to be able to run the same application at the same time in two clouds and be able to redirect traffic between those clouds as needed, right? They cannot rely on multiple regions within the same cloud either. So let's say they're deployed on US East, on AWS or any other client, it goes down. Guess where everybody else is going? Everybody else is going to US West. And everything will be messed up at US West also, because everybody who's down on US East is going to go to US West, and is going to create all kinds of problems. It's easier for them to go to another cloud vendors, US East or US West, than the same cloud vendors. So this is truly an example of multi-cloud is needed, and they need to be totally portable and be able to run in parallel on two clouds and move their data back and forth and synchronize their data back and forth. Scenario two, the pharma AI is actually multi-cloud from a portability perspective. They'll never need to run in two clouds at the same time. They can actually shut down everything, deprovision, and move everything, including the data, from one cloud to another cloud, and probably have enough time to do that. It's not a real-time load balancing situation, but this is multi-cloud. Their application needs to be portable. Their data needs to be portable. The third scenario, the virtual appliance, which does machine learning, that's not multi-cloud at all. They can have totally different solutions with the same algorithm and machine learning models in them to run on different clouds and run on-prem. One can be deployed to VMware, another one can be deployed in Kubernetes, another one can be deployed to IKS, and third one could be running in OpenShift on some other cloud. So they just need to support multiple clouds, not be multi-cloud. So I have found that most of the times when I go into a client and talk to them about multi-cloud, what we find is that what they need to do is support multiple clouds, not be multi-cloud in the sense of portability and all. So any questions so far, Matt, which I can take a pause here and address? Let me see, can I see the Q&A? A lot of chats, no Q&A, I think. So I'll continue.
Exactly that, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of chat, no Q&A.
Yes.
So please carry on.
So let me make a case for and against multi-cloud, right? The for case is pretty easy, right? People want portability. They want to be able to run on any cloud they want and go to the cheapest compute. Or be able to support, we move in real time between clouds, load between clouds in case they want, full redundancy across vendors. Another thing people talk about a lot is I don't want vendor lock-in. I want portability because I don't want to be locked into one vendor and be stuck with them forever. And, they keep cranking up the prices and then I'm toast. These are all fallacies, right? I mean, portability is not easy. Portability is, as the old guy says here, which is actually an anti-meme to this, is overrated. And where it is required also, it is extremely, extremely expensive because of three reasons. And let me go into all of them. Right? Data gravity, cloud services, and migration cost. Because of those three reasons, portability becomes a very, very, very high bar to achieve. And the business case which needs to be made to get true portability, like in the flower vendor's case or the pharma company's case, that bar needs to be really high for the business case to make portability worth it. So let's go into all three of them, right? So one, data gravity. Well, first of all, moving data is very expensive, right? most clouds are going to charge you an arm and a leg for network egress costs. Now, if you go with IBM or Oracle, then that cost is much lower. IBM does not charge you, from what I understand, still for network egress costs, and Oracle's cost is very low. But on the other hand, any other cloud, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg. Moving data also takes time. If you have a half a petabyte or you have 500, a few hundred terabytes of data, and you're trying to move it across the network from one cloud to the other cloud where you don't have access to their internal black fiber to move from one region to the other, it's going to take you a lot of time. So if you have that scenario like the flower vendor where you're going to move portably across and have data synchronized and data available from one cloud to the other cloud, and you don't have time to move a few gig of data, a few terabytes of data, you'd better be synchronizing in real time or near real time across them, otherwise you go down in one cloud, the amount of time it takes you to move data, and if your network is down, you can't even get to the data, it's going to, make problems for you. The other solution people try to come up with portability is I'll leave the data in one place. Maybe I'll leave it on-prem. Maybe I'll leave it in one cloud. So I don't have to pay data I don't have to pay data network egress costs. The data just lives in one place. But then if your data is in one cloud and your application is another cloud, you've got latency issues, right? Unless everything here is here in Ashburn, actually where I live. We have US East here for all three, all cloud vendors have the US East right here within like 10 miles of me. So unless you put everything here, anywhere else you go, the regions are not co-located like we are here in Northern Virginia, which is the data center capital of the world. And you're going to have network latency. And even here you'll have network latency because they don't have direct connections between Azure's region here and AWS's region here. So distance causes latency. And the third option is that I say, okay, data lives wherever it lives and I'll consolidate it later. And you end up with these multiple islands of data, which you now need to consolidate, you need to synchronize, and you're paying for storage in multiple places. And eventually when you try to consolidate all the data egress costs in multiple locations. So data gravity is the number one issue which you are going to face when you try to do portability in the cloud to support multi-cloud. The second has to do with cloud services. Every cloud vendor, the moment you get onto it, is going to try to get you to use their cloud services because that's what makes it sticky. If you're totally portable, you're not sticky at all. And you could say, okay, I won't use any cloud service. I will, which is vendor specific, and every service, no matter how much they say it's standardized and based on open standards and is open source, every service has some variations from one vendor to the other in how they're forked it from the open source, how the APIs work. It's always unique to a certain extent. So the other option is they say, okay, people say I'll deploy everything. I'll just put VMs out there, put everything on EC2. I'll manage all my services myself. I won't use any service from AWS or Azure. And then the question arises, are you're just using somebody else's infrastructure then? What is the value of cloud? How do you elastically scale your services? And the cost of overhead of managing all the services yourself and trying to make them highly available and make them elastic is going to be so high, it's not going to be worth it. The third option people say is, okay, I'll use an abstraction layer. I'll put an Anthos across all my clouds. I'll put, IBM multi-cloud manager across all my clouds. I'll put whatever, other vendor solution is. There are more and more of those abstraction layer solutions coming, which say, I'll be the common control plane and I'll abstract the cloud away from you. And most of these apps are, in my opinion, snake oil, right? And we'll talk more about that on a later slide, but they're still at a stage where they are immature at best, and in most cases don't work as advertised anyway. So the jury is still out on whether these abstraction layers will actually work. And then we have another major problem, which I'll talk about on my last slide, in adding an abstraction layer. The third reason why multi-cloud doesn't work or becomes extremely expensive is migration cost, right? It is the cost of moving your applications from one cloud to the other. The cost is not zero. I already talked about the cost of moving data. You have to move your environments, how you provision environments, all the automation, all your deployment, CI/CD tools, all your DevOps tooling, all your monitoring tools, all your runbooks, all your processes, how you manage security. All that now has to be moved from one cloud to the other. After all that also, and you do that, let's say you say, hey, I'm going to use the same tool stack everywhere and I'll only pick tools which run on any cloud. What about your people? How many people do you have on your staff have the same level of certifications in AWS and also in Azure? and we're willing to give up their AWS skills to go work on a project suddenly on Azure now, right? Whereas they know they can leave and go out and somebody else will hire them for the deep AWS skills, which is their primary skills, or vice versa if you flip the two clouds together. So cloud skills are not fungible, right? Somebody who's an expert on one is not an expert on the other. You might find some people who are working at higher levels, like somebody who's a Kubernetes expert. Well, a Kube expert is a Kube expert irrespective of where it's running, but the people managing the Kubernetes platform will need to understand the nuances of how that cloud has run their Kubernetes service, or how your OpenShift or whatever Kubernetes flavor you're running is going to run and behave on your cloud. Even VMware, right? VMware has a standard architecture called VMC, VMware Cloud, which runs on multiple clouds now, IBM, AWS, and Azure. The implementation is different. The implementation is massively different. And I think there's another European cloud in France, forget the name, where it runs also. But I've looked at all those implementations. They are different. A VMware expert on one will need to know how VMware cloud behaves on another cloud totally. So those skills are definitely not fungible. Lastly, as I promised, let's talk about how would an abstraction layer work, and what are the challenges with that. So the answer all these cloud vendors are coming up with is saying, I'm going to put in my abstraction layer, I'm going to create something called a multi-cloud manager, which will create this common control plane and common tools and common APIs and common abstraction layers for you to work on. And you put your application on that, we'll run on the whatever cloud of your choice, and your application just needs to work on us. I've seen this work, and I've seen this fail miserably. It works great in the beginning, especially if you understand where all the immaturities on those abstraction layers are. So you stay away from the immature parts and focus on some of the core areas that work. Like most of them only work for Kubernetes, for example, right now. Both Anthos and IBM Multicloud Manager are primarily Kubernetes management tools. They allow you to manage clusters on different clouds from a central control. But then what happens is when something goes wrong, when there's an incident, when there's an outage, you can't figure out where the problem lies. So here's a real-time scenario. I was working for a client. We had multi-cloud, and I won't say any names. Okay, we had this abstraction layer from one of the vendors running. We were running on two clouds. And we had this third-party multi-cloud solution, which was actually from one of the cloud vendors running on both clouds. And these were all the stakeholders. There were 8 different stakeholders, which I needed to get on a conference call when we had an outage to do some root cause analysis. We had the application owners from the cloud, from the client. We had both the cloud vendors. We had the multi-cloud multi-cloud manager solution vendor. The application was developed by a third party offshore. We had them. The managed service, there were some managed service people who were managing parts of the stack for my client. We had them in the room. There was a third-party network provider. They were in the room. And the client's own security team was on the call. We are all having these 8 people on a call, and everybody's pointing the finger to the other one and saying, I'm just an innocent bystander here. Your system is not working. And we just did not have the right level of observability tools in order to figure out where the problem lay. We opened tickets with both the cloud vendors, and they both promptly blamed the abstraction layer we are put in, saying that abstraction layer is broken. The abstraction layer people open tickets with both the clouds, and one of the cloud vendor goes, you're a competitor's product. Why do I care about you? Not so many words. And put their ticket at the bottom of the stack. So this problem, it took us like days to restore service at the right quality level. And this wasn't an outage. Outages are easier to fix. This was a degradation in quality and performance, and we couldn't figure out where it was. And this took us days to figure out who would be responsible for what. Eventually, once this was done and we resolved it, and it was a network issue like it always is. Once we resolved it, we started creating a RACI to say, let's look at every possible scenario. And the RACI had 2,500 rows. 2,500 rows to manage things between the 8 columns for everything that we had to take care of and assign responsibility and authority over. And still, we had to now follow up the RACI with new runbooks and new workflows to figure out next time we have an outage or incident, how would we address it? So net, 2 takeaways, right? Number 1, the solution from most of these multi-cloud management vendors are immature. One of my colleagues at IBM always used to say their PowerPoint is way ahead of their code right now. They're promising much more than they can deliver. And secondly, you got to really, when somebody comes and says, I need to do multi-cloud. What they really might mean is I need to support multiple clouds, which is different from multi-cloud, right? Do they need to run simultaneously on two clouds? Do they really need portability between multiple clouds? Or will it be actually better to build two versions of the application, one for cloud A and one for cloud B? And those questions need to be asked. So anyway, that's my presentation. I have a link to my blog where I've detailed this more. But if anybody would like to reach me, here is my contact information. If anybody's interested in having a conversation, if you have a real world problem you would like or situation scenario you'd like to discuss, you can book a free 30-minute one-on-one with me. You can go to my blog, sdarchitect.blog, and click on request a meeting, or you can just scan this QR code and it'll take you straight to my Calendly, and I have some time slots open. But if you do book a time slot, please tell me what it's for and what you'd like to talk about, so I'm prepared. Also, I'm getting a lot of these time slots, unfortunately, for people looking for jobs. I cannot help you there. I can maybe help you make some connections, but we don't need a 30-minute call for that. Send me a DM on Twitter or LinkedIn for that. So with that, I'll pause and see if we have any questions, Matt.
Good stuff. Sanjeev, thank you very much. Okay, so yes, we have had a few questions, one of which was a good question at the time that that it was asked, but I think you've already answered. So that was a question about how viable these multi-cloud solutions are, things like ARC and Anthos. So I think we'll skip that because I think the answer is one word. Yeah. So Giles also points out multi-cloud solutions create added layers of complexity. And I think, again, you kind of covered that and said, well, yes, it does. And yeah, it ends up with lots of finger pointing and ambiguity over whose responsibility fixing things are. Did you want to add anything to that?
I think in hindsight, the thing we did wrong was we didn't create that RACI before we deployed. Right? It was a huge mistake, right? We knew the complexity, but also we did not appreciate how the relationship between a cloud vendor on which another vendor's multi-cloud solution is running, how they look at it. They treat it as just another workload, not as a management layer. If one of their partners puts a management layer on top of a cloud vendor solution and it's a partner, they're going to treat it like a partner solution and help them. But when it's a third-party vendor, especially a competitor putting a multi-cloud solution on that, they treat it as just another workload from a client. They're not giving any preference, and quite frankly, internally they might be, degrading the priority of the ticket given it's a competitor's solution. So we didn't appreciate that enough, and obviously we made the mistake of not having that RACI fleshed out. We had a RACI. It was like maybe 30, 40 rows, and across those 8 columns. But afterwards, when we really spent time and spent 2 weeks on it, we got a 2,400 plus row RACI, and that should be enough reason to tell you, enter this with caution.
It's not such a good idea. Yeah, never underestimate the power of a RACI to put people off doing work. Yeah. Okay. So another question from Giles, and I'm not sure if this is information you're privy to. Which is about, do you know how often the major vendors, AWS, Azure, GCP, have had full outages in a region that would need, that would cause a need to implement a multi-cloud solution?
Well, I think the data is published. If not them, some of these metrics companies keep publishing this kind of data. So it should be available. Outage does happen. So, you got to figure out, in fact, if you go back and read Netflix's history on why they created chaos engineering as a practice within Netflix, it was because they had region level, blowouts, right? And their service was down. So they've started building systems which could be resilient across regions. I don't know if they've done multi-cloud yet. I know they have some services running on Azure, at least I heard. I saw one of them speak at a Microsoft conference. So I know they do, but I don't know how portable they are across clouds. But that outage information is public information, right? So it is available. I don't know if and I've seen some of these analyst reports where they report them pretty, regularly. And some of these monitoring companies like Catchpoint probably also publish them.
Good stuff. Thank you. Okay, and final question from Hamad, who first of all is complimenting you on your background. I've got an Adaptivist t-shirt.
Series, guys. This is not the new stuff. This is not Picard. This is the original stuff.
So that looks like, no, I could be really pedantic. I think that's from one of the films. That's
Is
NCC
it?
1701A, which is a later one.
Okay,
So
now
that's
I'll
the
have
most
to. Now
geeky
you
thing I've
got
ever
me. I'll
said.
have to go do some research on it.
Actually, I know that's not the most geeky thing I've ever said, which is quite depressing, really. But yeah, before with that Picard stuff, even though I love that. So yeah, let's just talk about Star Trek. No. So Hamid's question is, yeah, at least he is a Trekkie. Yeah, fully on board with that. Sorry, that's not his question. Do you think customers really understand the difference between multi-cloud solutions and multiple cloud solutions?
Yeah, in fact, I just had a briefing with a CIO of a managed service provider, so you would expect him to know. And I had to explain to him that what they had built was not a multi-cloud solution, but a multiple cloud solution, right? A company, a product, a platform which runs on multiple clouds, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's an overloaded term. People misuse it, and it's like hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. How many times have I had to explain the difference between the two, right? So when somebody does say multi-cloud, my first question is, what do you mean by multi-cloud? What goal are you trying to achieve, right? And something like that flower company, the flower vendor, is really an outlier. Nobody else needs that level of resilience and availability and then they don't run it on two clouds simultaneously for the whole year, right? It's only on those 6 days that they do it, but they have to be prepared for it, right? Although the rest of the time they're fine with, 99.95 SLA or whatever they are targeting. And you can get much better than that doing multi-zone within region and multi-region. So I think people don't understand. And when they do say, give me good reasons, I always tell them, have you at least done multi-region before? If you have not even, if your system cannot even run in multiple regions within the same cloud, then I'm not even talking to you about multi-cloud. You're not ready. Your teams are not ready. Your systems are not ready. Can you explain to me how much more it'll cost you if you move from US East to Ohio? Right? Ohio is the most expensive region in America. Did you know that? Most people don't know that. They think every region is the same. I'm like, no, that's not true. So, that maturity to be able to consume multiple clouds has to be preceded by maturity to consume one cloud properly, especially first multi-zone, AZ, and then multi-region. Then you can talk about multi-cloud. So I help them on that journey. I have to help them on that journey. And then we figure out, do they really need it? I think that's the even before solving any technical issues, you got to make the business case for, do you really need multi-cloud?
Good stuff. Excellent. Thank you, Sanjeev. So one final question from, apologies if I say your name wrong, Echimofo Moye, who has been using Terraform to migrate away from AWS. What do you think of cloud agnostic tools like Terraform to provision multi-cloud environments? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, so I would argue Terraform is not cloud agnostic, right? Terraform is cloud. It is not. It allows you to deploy the same workflows and same processes on multiple clouds, but when you implement it, you still have to use the cloud-specific operators. So is that multi-cloud or is that multiple cloud, right? So one can have that semantic discussion, but I'm starting, and quite frankly, for this other client, which I was just mentioning to, where I had the briefing to the CIO on multi-cloud versus multiple cloud, I did recommend Terraform for them for that very reason. I said, what you really need is the ability to run the same platform the same way and have the same runbooks and the same workflows on multiple clouds. So use something like Terraform, where you can implement exactly the same workflows. So from a consumer of those workflows, of the Terraform jobs you create, I think Terraform calls them jobs. I know Chef calls them recipes. I don't know what Terraform calls them, right? I forget. The jobs you create. So somebody using them who has to do something, do a process and say, okay, I need to deploy this. I need to deprovision this environment. I need to change this environment's, load balancing rules or policies here. To a consumer of it, it will look exactly the same whether you're doing it on any cloud. That's the end goal of Terraform. For the implementer, the operators they're using are still going to be different from cloud to cloud to cloud. I mean, that's the nature of those operators. That's why you have them. But because there are so many operators, it creates that abstraction level for you. So from somebody who's writing the Terraform code, you're still having to rewrite the code every time you add a new cloud. But for your consumers, your clients who are going to use the Terraform code, yes, it has become portable across clouds, and you are multi-cloud from that perspective. So Terraform is excellent technology for that, and I don't think and it's always my first choice. And now they're coming up with managed services. They just announced Council for AWS, so I think it'll only get more interesting with what HashiCorp is going to do, and is the trajectory they're on is very interesting.
Good stuff. Excellent. Thank you, Sanjeev. Yes, brilliant talk, some good questions, nicely fielded. So thank you very much, panelists. If you want to just come off on mute and just give Sanjeev a little round of applause.
Thank you. And I apologize. I do need to jump, for my next call. So sorry, Josh, I'll be missing your call, but I will watch the recording later on. Apologies for not staying. Thanks for having me, Matt, and thanks everybody for being such gracious hosts. If anybody has any follow-on questions, I'm very public. You can reach me. LinkedIn or Twitter are the best way to reach me. I do try to respond within 24 hours. And if you'd like to have a chat, please do. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Good night.